And I actually took a little break and I'm back. I mean, you can't stop at his death. Oh, you can't. I worry, a lot of people, I don't know for a fact, but I feel like a lot of people stop at the death and forgiveness of sins. But there's a whole big part that gets even better. And I'm not sure people talk about it as much. I don't know, or I'm totally wrong. But I'm excited to keep going. And it is, this chapter's the resurrection. Okay, you ready? Come on here, try to get you a little sparkle. Okay. Now, it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. Because the Jewish leaders did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath, they asked to have their legs broken and their bodies taken down. The soldiers, therefore, came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then the legs of the other man. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with his spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. And that's, I don't know, one of those surprising things in the book of Luke again. His blood and water, I had to look into that. When you've been dead for a while, the blood and water actually do separate. So when they pierced him, you know, Jesus had the 3 hours on the cross, and he sent his spirit up. He was dead. I mean, not that 3 hours is short, but for the other guys, they were still there. They were alive, so they broke their legs. So the separation of blood and water means it was another evidence that he did send his spirit up. He died at that moment. And Luke documented it being the physician. I think so. I'm not sure of that one. So again, he sent his spirit up. I didn't add to it. I just repeated myself on that one. Okay. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe. So it's like literally a person who's saying, no, I saw this. So he witnessed it. Remember, one of the commandments is don't give false testimony. You wouldn't say that you witnessed something if it didn't actually happen. You're testifying, what did I see? This man saw it. These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. That's about Jesus. And they didn't break his legs. And as another scripture says, they will look on the one they have pierced. So that speaks again. They pierced his side. Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. But with permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus in the night. Nicodemus brought a mixture. Do you remember him? He was saying, how can you be born again? But it is of flesh and then born of spirit. He brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with spices in strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden was a new tomb which no one had ever been laid in. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said," calling Jesus a deceiver, "after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure on the third day." It's just funny. It's just funny. Even on the third day, they're still worried about him. If they put Jesus to death and they thought everybody believed him, even if they didn't want to. They didn't want to show that they believed him. Because if it were true, then they wouldn't have their power, and they're bragging as, I get the best seat at church, and everybody looks up to me on the streets. They were so proud. They couldn't admit it. But they still put extra guards. If they didn't believe them, they put extra guards. I just think that's rather ironic. I'm losing my spot. I'll hopefully remember to catch this up and not make you sit here while I find it. "Take a guard. Make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting a guard. Jesus died and was buried on Friday. The next day was the Jewish Sabbath, and a guard was posted to prevent any tampering with the body. Then, on the first day of the week, Sunday, those who mourned Jesus came to pay their respects. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him, they shook and became like dead men. I would say they couldn't move. They're just standing there. Oh my God. Oh, I probably look ridiculous, but they're shaking. Oh my goodness. So what did we just have? This appearance was like lightning. The clothes were white as snow. And the guards were so afraid of the angel that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. What? He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, ran to tell the other disciples. So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the stripes of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. That cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw it and believed. They still did not understand from the scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. Wow. Oh. What? And the linens were separate. The cloth was lying in its place, separate from the linen. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. As the disciples ran away, she's just there crying. And she saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been. One at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they've put him." At this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there. But she didn't even realize it was Jesus. Oh my goodness. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" And Jesus is asking, "Who is it you're looking for?" This is too exciting. I can't even do the little thing. Thinking he was the gardener, she asked, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him and I will get him." Jesus said to Mary, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them I have ascended to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. Now the same day 2 of them were going to the village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. So they're like just walking, kind of looking when you're not looking up. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" Like, all of this just happened, like within the week. That was 3 days later. Oh, arrested him. They crucified him. They buried him. And now what's Peter and John's much younger, runs up, but kind of scared to go in. And then Peter just goes in behind him. Nobody's there. Just the linen separated. Then Mary goes there crying. And Jesus is literally there, like flesh and blood. Not whenever you have like those thoughts. I know when he's talking to me. When he answers me really fast. I'm thinking about stuff, and if I'm thinking and it's like, whatever I come up with, I'm not sure. But then I'll get an answer that's like, da-da-da. And then I feel so stupid. Like, why didn't I think of that before? That's been my own personal experience. And like when I know sure or doubt. And when in doubt, don't. Oh my goodness, I am way off on that one. Whew, it just